Hello friends and fellow VEDSies, and welcome back to another day of VEDS. Today I'm going to kind of be responding to Tessa's individual challenge for me, which was to kind of cast all of the different VEDSies as superheroes, whether it be the X-Men or just superheroes more widely. But Tessa also caveated this by saying that if that was too hard, then I could just cast myself. And here's the thing, I was working on it, trying to crack the code. My master plan ended up being that I wasn't going to cast the VEDSies as superheroes, I was going to cast them as superhero teams. Like, which VEDSi is Young Justice and which VEDSi is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I still really like the idea, I just haven't been able to crack it, and we're running out of days in VEDS, so I might get to that next year. In this video, I am taking the caveat option, and I'm just casting myself. And in a way, I feel even less qualified to evaluate my own personality as it relates to superhero characters than I do other people. But I'm gonna give it a shot, mainly by zeroing in and being like, I'm not a superhero. Superheroes are too archetypical, they're too aspirational. Sure, I would love to be a Nightcrawler or a Kitty Pryde, but I'm not that. I'm a normal person. I'm Jimmy Olsen. Well, maybe not. I'm not as cool as Jimmy Olsen, but I sure aspire to be. Jimmy Olsen is the photographer of the Daily Planet, the newspaper that Superman works at. If you've ever seen an adaptation of Superman, it's usually the kid with red hair and a bow tie. If you saw Batman vs. Superman, it's the dude who gets shot at the beginning for no reason. Jimmy Olsen dates back pretty far. There's an unnamed newspaper boy who appears in one of the very early Action Comics who then gets retconned to be Jimmy Olsen. But Jimmy Olsen is actually created in the Superman radio show, a show that had a lot of influence on the Superman mythos. He quickly carried over to the comics and eventually got a comic of his own, Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen. You see, there are multiple Superman books. Of course, you had Action Comics with Superman. You had Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, which was kind of a romance comic, but also had very strange plots involving sci-fi contraptions and stuff. You had Superboy, which was the young adventures of Superman. Eventually you would get Supergirl, and you had Superman's pal, Jimmy Olsen, which, much like Lois Lane, is about a normal person who just superhero shenanigans often happen to because they are adjacent to a superhero. But where the plots in Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane usually revolved around Lois trying to get Superman to propose, this just was bizarre. It would be Jimmy Olsen turns into a turtle, or Jimmy Olsen has to eat a bunch of food. Jimmy Olsen is the king of his own island. There's a lot there. Sometimes he even got superpowers. Sometimes he turned evil. It was just kind of like a roll your dice type situation. But probably the longest lasting legacy of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen is that when Jack Kirby switched over from Marvel to DC, that's the book he went to. Jack the King Kirby, the pillar of Marvel, decided when he swapped over to DC, he wanted Jimmy Olsen. I love it. But this is what he did with him. He introduced Darkseid, who is the most dangerous person in the DC universe. That would spin off into Jack Kirby's Fourth World comics, which a lot of people read as his magnum opus. This long, stretching, mythological, cosmic story about old gods and new gods fighting over the very essence of hope in life, of grand allegory for fascism, all because a kid with a bow tie got his own comic book. I love it. Okay, so I've been talking a lot about the legacy of Jimmy Olsen, but what do I aspire? Well, Jimmy Olsen is a very goofy guy. He's not bad at his job, but he certainly has a way of getting into complicated and silly situations. And I'm a goofy guy. I like getting into silly situations. He goes with the flow. He knows how to adapt, how to switch lanes in this crazy DC universe. He is never caught off guard. And he typically gets along with everyone. Sure, people may be annoyed at his hijinks. However, usually by the end of the story, they're fine with him. They're just kind of annoyed with the situations he spawns. He treats people well. He's a photographer, so he's got the creativity down. And sometimes he accidentally marries the princess of another galaxy and has to have a divorce proceeding while he is hunted down by Batman. That's from the recent Matt Fraction run of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. It's great. It's one of the funniest comics I've ever read. Ultimately, here's the thing. There's nothing that special about me. I'm just a nerdy guy from Tennessee. But there's nothing special about Jimmy Olsen either. He's just a kid who gets caught up in a bunch of shenanigans. And I feel like that is something to strive for. Friends and fellow VEDSies, I will see you tomorrow.